What is up, Bucks fans? You are listening to Buck Life, the Hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fan podcast made by Hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fans for Hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fans. I'll start it off with an obligatory Grayson Allen reference. Anyways, today on our show we have another traveler, not quite as far as last time. Lee came from Australia, but Andy Robbie is joining us today from sunny Arizona. Actually, he's in Milwaukee, but from sunny Arizona. What up, dude?
How's it going, man? It's good to be here. A little chilly, but I'm doing good and a little bit different than doing this over Skype. So
yeah, we've had you on a couple times over Skype, and it's a little more comfortable. We don't have to wear the headsets to be able to hear
Chuck,
you.
by the way.
Yeah, in case you don't know, this is the other host here.
Yeah, fuck him.
Yeah, so nice to have you in person. You know, I know we get to see you up here a couple times a year. It seems you're up here 2 times a year, give or take, you know, and nice to have you in studio, so to say, even though this is really just Jake's dining room.
Yeah. Not a lot of dining happens in here. Mostly the podcast. That's probably the most, usage that we get out of this room. Anyways, recently the Bucks, since we last checked in with you guys, have gone 4-1 wins versus the Miami Heat, New Orleans Pelicans, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Memphis Grizzlies, and a loss at Toronto. Of course, Giannis and Jabari are still doing their thing. Giannis is pretty much a triple-double threat every night.
You know, there was an interesting, I heard this, I don't remember if I was listening to the radio or the TV, but during one of the games, apparently in the pregame press conference, which Jason Kidd has every day, they talked about how Giannis is the point guard going forward and going into next season. It's no longer an experiment.
I did not hear that.
I heard this, I believe it was from Ted Davis on the radio broadcast, that basically this is no longer an experiment. They view him as the point guard for now and next season. Now, things could obviously change if you get in the draft and you get, the right player, and who knows where we're going to end up in. But that to me was one of the most exciting things I've seen lately, because he is just a triple-double machine lately. He had another one versus the Nets. Nets. He was an assist short versus Toronto, 4 assists short versus Memphis, but anyone who watched that Memphis game remembers that our bench played the entire fourth quarter. That was actually Block City by Miles Plumlee and John Henson with his return. Things got a little feisty towards the end. Now, did you get a chance to watch that game? I don't know where you were with your traveling lately.
Yeah, we got a chance to watch it back, and obviously nice to see Henson get a little bit hyped up there at the end.
Looked kind of silly with his stupid constipated face at the end.
It was kind of a silly, angry face, but honestly, we've seen this before. We saw it in the Knicks game earlier this year. Anytime Henson plays with a little fire, he's actually a pretty damn good player. But he just doesn't seem to have that fire on a consistent basis.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see it more than twice a year.
It would be. It'd be fantastic to see it.
We just need to play Matt Barnes every game, because that guy's
Matt Barnes is a punk.
Yeah, Matt Barnes is a piece of shit. It was nice seeing him fail really badly in that game. I mean, he was clanking threes, getting blocked. I think Giannis had a huge block on him, and then shortly after that incident happened with Henson.
Well, and it was great because, that game was, the Bucks were winning that game after that point, and usually they say Barnes is the kind of guy that'll get into another player's head, and clearly we were in his head because, as he said, every shot, he put up every shot he got his hands on. He clanged everything. He was missing free throws. And, you could see that he was pissed off and it was getting to him. So anytime I see a punk-ass bitch get what's coming to him, that's always a good thing.
Yeah, we had 17 total blocks in that Memphis game. It was Giannis, Henson, Plumlee, and Ingles all had at least 3 blocks, the 4 of them. I mean, that was just... It gets to a point when you have that many blocks that I was literally laughing out loud every time they got a block because it was just so ridiculous, the level of blocks there.
It was like watching NBA Jam or something, or playing NBA
it was
2K
like
and turning the block slider all the way up.
I'll say how crazy it is, how quickly Giannis gets his rebounds, assists, and points up to the point where he almost has a triple-double in the first half now. It's just crazy to see. And I guess now that we know that Giannis is the point guard going into next season, that'll completely change who we're looking at as far as trade partners and free agency now.
And the draft, right?
Yeah, and I don't know anymore if like a Jeff Teague type player would be the best fit. In fact, he definitely wouldn't. I'm pro Jeff Teague.
Okay, me and Andy have had a lot of discussions about Jeff Teague back and forth. Let's just say we don't see eye to eye on him.
But not with Giannis running the point guard. I do understand that he would not be the best fit in that circumstance, which is okay with me. As long as he keeps putting up numbers like this, I'm good with whatever.
Yeah, Giannis running the point is why on the last podcast I said I've come around on the idea of Grayson Allen as a player on the Bucks because I want 3 and D.
Grayson Allen, you say?
Well,
huh?
that's I just want someone like that. Whether it's him through the draft or someone else, and he hasn't even announced that he's coming out necessarily. We don't even know if he'll be available in the draft. So just someone we don't necessarily need a point guard at that second guard position. We need someone who can shoot the 3 and play the defense. So whoever that is. It remains to be seen.
Well, and I like Allen's D, and I also like his defense.
Yeah, the other like everything about him. A little creepy, but
well, okay. So a little backstory here. Andy's visiting his hometown. He lives in Arizona now, but he's been staying with me. And what did you say? You've actually kept track every day. I've just brought up Grayson Allen at least once, and this morning I brought it up within 10 minutes of waking up.
Yeah, and it's 7 a.m. and I'm thinking at least the guy's going to go an hour or two without bringing him up, and sure enough, he'll find an excuse to bring him up. It's borderline creepy.
You say a little obsessive there.
Yeah, I would say he's probably tried to get his phone number, talk him into coming out.
I would say if we end up drafting him, it's a safe bet that there will be some sort of restraining order filed against me, and I'm fine with that. I think I recognize that it's not healthy.
Yeah.
So as long as I've come to terms with it, it's cool.
Yeah. I can't say I have the same love. Like I said, I'm not. Overall, as a player, I'm not as high on him as you are, but as a fit with Giannis at the point, I think it's a decent fit. Now, there's other players who could also fit that role that I'd be fine with as well. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
You've got Buddy Hield from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Some of the point guards that have thrown out. Chris Dunn is kind of projected to go top 5, but I don't like the fit. He's a ball handler. He's a defensive guy, which is great, but not a great shooter. He's reminds me a little bit of Michael Carter-Williams.
Chris Dunn did hit a cold-blooded 3 late in the first round of the game. He pulled up from NBA range and drained that.
I could see the value if he's there for you around 10 or 11 where we're projected right now.
I think he's definitely value where we are projected to pick. It's I think first priority, and we'll obviously as the season winds down, we're going to be probably focusing more on the off season than things that are happening on the court. But priority number 1 is seeing what we can do with Monroe and Michael Carter-Williams. I can't imagine Michael Carter-Williams is going to have much value, but Monroe does. We've talked about it before. Can we get that other guard spot filled up with a trade with Greg Monroe, with another team where they have a need and a fit for a Greg Monroe player, and we have a need and a fit for someone who can shoot the 3 and play the defense?
Well, I was going to say on Greg Monroe and kind of ask you guys your opinion. We know a little bit about this situation with Dwight Howard at the trade deadline and that we made the offer and we wanted Dwight Howard to opt in. Do you think it's going to be a similar situation with Monroe where teams are wanting him to opt in to that final year of his deal in order to make a trade possible?
I definitely could see that being the case, especially if the team that we're trading with is giving up a major asset that's a long-term asset. Obviously, you don't want to risk that at the thought of just getting one season out of Monroe, especially when you don't even know if he's going to be a good fit for your team. So Yes, I agree with you there. I don't think... even if there's a trade to be had where he says, no, I'm not opting in, I do think that going into next year, pretty much regardless of what happens, he's going to be on another team. Whether that means we get less assets back in a trade, I think they tried, and it was a valiant effort. The value was there, and you created an asset out of nothing. So there's no shame in having to cash in that asset and try something else.
Yeah, I think the other factor with a team wanting him to opt in is that he's pretty good value at his contract. He's a max contract now, but the salary cap is going to be increasing these next couple of years. So a max contract 2 years from now is a bigger number than a max contract right now. So certainly I would think that would be their first choice, and then it just becomes up to, does Monroe want to do that? Is he going to a place where he wants to be there? Or do we have to give up less value, like you said, take less back for him? Either way, we didn't give up anything to sign Greg Monroe. So like you said, we did create an asset out of nothing, and he does have value around the league. It's just not the best fit on the Bucks. And it seems very clear with all the rumors that came out after the trade deadline that the Bucks realized that he's not the best fit. And it's kind of interesting that they put him back into the starting lineup after, they had Miles Plumlee starting for a while, and I'm not sure what the thought process was between bringing him back into the starting lineup.
Well, I could see that possibly being a situation where Monroe was unhappy, even though he was saying all the right things about coming off the bench. So you'd rather maybe just have to deal with it for a few more games, put him in the starting lineup, and keep him happy, keep his value up. Then you don't have to worry about teams looking at his post numbers once he goes to the bench and that. But it is kind of interesting that we talked about a trade that almost happened with Houston. If you can make a trade and secure that other guard spot, it would be great for the Bucks to be able to just go best player available in the draft then and not have to look so much for need. And that could still be a guard. That doesn't really matter. But Houston, they have a guard that I think would fit in nicely. His name's Patrick Beverley, good 3-and-D player. I think he's kind of underappreciated, and I know he's due for a payday too. So salaries have to match up, and some might say you're selling Monroe's value short. Obviously, you could include more in the deal, but just throwing that name out there in case anybody doesn't know it, that could be a decent fit for the Bucks moving forward.
Well, and I think you make the salaries work because, like you said, he's due for a payday, so his salary is going to approach a level closer to Greg Monroe. I don't know how close it's going to be. You're going to have to throw in something else to make the numbers work, but that is certainly an interesting name that I hadn't really given any thought. And with Houston, they're kind of in a position where they need to do something to shake it up. Because
they're losing Dwight this offseason.
Yeah, exactly.
That is happening.
They're losing Dwight, so they either need to replace him or they need to completely gut it and tank, is where Houston's at. They're not at a place where they can just plug anyone in and continue the level where they're at. So if they don't do something significant, like a Greg Monroe trade, they're just going to end up in 8th seed territory, and that's
purgatory.
The worst spot to be at, and we
know that.
Yes, we know this all too well as Bucks fans.
Well, I have a question though. The Dwight thing. It appears that it almost happened. Do you think that the Bucks go after Dwight Howard in free agency, and do you think that that's the right move?
I started I think I was talking to you the other day about that and kind of thinking about that. He would be a better fit than Monroe, no question about that. But everything that I've heard about him is not good in the locker room. I don't particularly want him on a max deal on our team. If it would have been something short-term, like half of this season for Monroe, and say we would have got a pick as well or something like that, I could have dealt with it. But I don't want him. Do I think that we'd go after him? I'm not so sure. Sometimes the Bucks surprise me.
Well, and it's Jason Kidd. Is it John Hammond? We still don't know what the hell is going on with that dynamic. I mean, and Howard, he has a lot of the skills that have made Miles Plumlee such a good fit with the current starting five before he got moved back to the bench, which is the shot blocking, the rebounding, setting good screens and that. But I think the problem with Dwight is he still thinks he's a superstar number one option guy, and here in Milwaukee, at best, he's going to be your fourth scoring option.
Yeah, it's if Dwight Howard was 5-10 years younger, the idea of going after him would excite me a lot more. Kind of for the same reason that even though we questioned whether Greg Monroe would be a good fit going into the season, and we have all season long, the idea of going after a young player on a max contract and getting them to actually come to Milwaukee is exciting. At this point, he's kind of over the hill towards the end of his career. We saw lots of those types of signings under the Herb Cole regime. We'd always bring in those guys towards the end of their career, and it was never exciting then. It wouldn't excite me now. Could it work? In theory, it could. He's still got something left. It's not something I want to do or I'd advocate for if I was the one making the calls, but I guess we just wait and see. He's a bit of a head case, too. Well, I don't know that I want him in that locker room.
Well, I think what it would come down to is you'd have to sit him down and say, look, we think you can be a huge piece. We think you can make us a contender. but we need you to be a role player. We need you to do these little things. Focus mostly on your defense. The offense, that's going to come to you just by getting your offensive rebounds, and Giannis is going to find you for dunks and that. You're not going to get 10 post-ups a game like you want. Kind of like what we saw earlier with Monroe this year. It doesn't adhere to this style of team and this roster makeup. So again, in a perfect world, if Dwight would be willing to do that and take a back seat, sure, but I have serious doubts that he would do that for any team, let alone a market like Milwaukee or a non-glamorous city like Milwaukee. We're going to do something a little bit fun now. Going with the March Madness theme here, what we've done is, and please bear with us because we don't know how this is going to go, but we've made up a little mini bracket of the greatest Milwaukee Bucks of all time. Now, I'm sure there's going to be some controversy about who's in this bracket alone, and also the seeding of where these guys sit. But here's the format: we've got 32 Bucks players. We seeded them 1 through 8 in 4 different brackets or sides of the bracket, and because we have 3 Bucks fans here with 3 differing views, we're just going to vote on who moves on in each bracket and try to see who the greatest Milwaukee Buck is of all time. And also, the criteria is there's no criteria. It's whatever you think. So that could be performance on the court. It could be straight numbers. It could be what kind of representative they were for the team, for the city, and if you just like the player or if you don't. So it's going to be interesting. So I think we should let's kick this off here because this could go a little bit longer.
Yeah, we've got 32 players here. We're not going 64 deep like the NCAA tournament.
Well, it's funny because even going 32 deep, you get towards the 6, 7, 8 seeds and it gets rough. It kind of just a sad reminder of the history of the franchise and Jabari and Giannis, please be everything we want you to be, so we can get a little bit more credibility here. Holy moly. But
it was tough getting these last few names. Luckily, by the time I got over here for recording, Jake had about, 25 of the names filled in, and you were really scraping the bottom of the barrel for these. So you'll have to excuse the number, let's say 6 to 8 seeds are all probably going to be maybe players you forgot even played on the Bucks.
Well, let's kick it off. The first matchup is going to be Lou Alcindor, a.k.a. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, going up against he's the 1 seed, obviously. The 8 seed would be, we have Tim Thomas as the 8 seed, who, again, it's kind of laughable to see him in there, but he was an important piece to that 2001 team, so it's not a complete joke to see him in this tournament. Can we all just agree that Kareem obviously moves on to the next round, as much as I hate Kareem?
Kareem is the only time we've gotten a championship. If anyone votes for Tim Thomas over him, it's... Like you said, he was an important piece in 2001, which is the last time we had any significant run in the playoffs. So that is essentially that year is what got Tim Thomas on this list. But it's got to go to Kareem. I'm assuming Andy's not going to object to that.
Absolutely, but I will point out that Jake did rush out and buy a Tim Thomas jersey back in the day. He was a very big fan.
No, I actually, quick sidebar, I did not buy a Tim Thomas jersey. This is interesting. It just hit me. I had an old school, it was like a replica painted Kareem jersey with the old Bucks logo, and we were going to a playoff game, and I traded that for a Tim Thomas jersey. Oh, okay. I traded a Kareem jersey for a Tim Thomas. That's how big of a fan I was.
You traded, so you traded the number 1 seed jersey for
the number 8
for
seed.
Tim Thomas, who is arguably the number 32 seed in our tournament.
Yeah.
That's not good value for you.
No.
In hindsight, that is really bad value.
We do funny things when we're young. Next matchup is going to be another 1 seed, Sidney Moncrief versus Terry Blue Edwards.
I loved Blue Edwards as a kid. I mean, that's some of my earliest memories of the Bucks is going to games and watching him throw down some crazy dunks. But obviously, Moncrief gets that one.
Yeah, for everything that we're critical of Sid as his commentary over the last couple years on Fox Sports Wisconsin, everything
that can go in your criteria if you want.
But Blue Edwards, we've not really had him as a commentator, so I can't really compare that. So we got to go to on-court stuff. So for as bad as he was at times on the TV broadcast, he was equally brilliant on the court at times in his career here. So definitely, I think this is going to be like the regular NCAA tournament. A number 8 seed is never going to beat a number 1 seed, probably.
We'll see.
We'll see, but I have a feeling that these are going to be chalk for these, at least the number 1 seeds. We'll see when we get to those 4-5 matchups. Things might get interesting. We might get a little heated.
Now, moving on, this is, now that I look at it, I wish I could reseed this a little bit, but the Big O, Oscar Robertson, is the 1 seed versus the 8 seed, Chris Middleton, who I think in a few years, if we did this same thing, would be much higher than an 8 seed, assuming he keeps playing at the level he is, but Big O is kind of, to me, a controversial 1 seed because he didn't spend much time here, but he got that championship ring, and without him, I don't think we get that championship ring. So, I guess, are we all in consensus that Big O over Chris Middleton?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Big O's honestly one of my favorite players of all time. For anyone to basically average a triple-double over the entire course of a season is such an impressive feat. So Middleton, like you said, in a few years, if we do this, if we make this an annual tradition, maybe next year he's higher than an 8 seed. Maybe in a couple years he's moved himself up to that 4 or 5 line. Don't know how.
I hope so.
I hope so too. But for now, he's got a tough matchup against Big O, and we got one more number 1 seed here.
We do. We're gonna go again. Could be a controversial number 1 seed, but Walter Ray Allen, aka Jesus Shuttlesworth, versus Lucius Allen. If Dan Helsel was one of the guys who made this, I don't even know if he'd have Ray Allen in the bracket.
Yeah.
But
or this would be your upset right here for sure.
Yeah. If there was a number 1 seed that could be taken down, it would be Ray Allen versus anyone when Dan Helsel is voting, because he would go anyone.
He would take John Brockman over Ray Allen.
John Brockman versus Ray Allen. Dan Helsel's going with John Brockman. So, but yes, Ray Allen's got to move on. He is just a class act, great player, and he
should have finished his career here. Should have never left.
Probably the driving force behind that 2001 season.
All right, well, we're going to start with the number 2 seeds versus the 7 seeds. We've got John McLaughlin as a 2 seed versus John Salmons. And again, as a 7 seed. Salmons, granted, he didn't spend a lot of time here, but again, why I have him in the bracket is he was vital to that 2000 and, was that?
2006-7.
Fear the Deer.
Yeah, Fear the Deer year.
That was 2009, 2010.
Where am I going? 2006, 2009, 2010.
Chuck's getting old.
Oh, yeah, I am.
So again, if we don't make that trade, the Bucks don't make that little mini run. But again, John McLaughlin, for everything that he means to the Bucks franchise, you could argue he's a 1 seed in this tournament. I think we're pretty much in consensus that he would move on over Johnny Salmons.
Yeah, and I will say that the 06-07 year, Salmons, I felt very confident.
2009.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're getting thrown off by me.
Way to ruin everything, Chuck.
Anyway, I was very confident every time he took a shot that it was going to go in. Just had a good feeling about him that season. So, yeah, definitely contributed, but no match for Johnny Mac. Mr.
That's
Buck.
right, GM.
Yeah, it's Johnny Mac, not only his on-court additions to the team, but helping found the Mac Fund, which does a lot for it's Midwest Athletes Against Childhood Cancer. Most of our listeners probably know that, but I know we get a few Aussies and they may not be 100% familiar with what the Mac Fund is, but fantastic Wisconsin charity that now not only Johnny McLaughlin is involved in, but Aaron Rodgers and tons of the Brewers players, other Bucks. So he's got his time on his court, his charity work, and then 30 years as a broadcaster now. They're celebrating that right now, 30 years of him and Paschke. So he has, he could arguably be a number 1 seed. If anyone was going to move up to the number 1 seed from a 2, I could make a case for him over probably Big O. He wasn't here that long. Maybe Ray Allen, just because we didn't win a championship with him. But he's got to move on, and there's a reason he's called Mr. Buck.
Next number 2 seed versus a 7 is we have Junior Bridgman versus Jabari Parker, who again is a guy that's going to be on this list. I guess for the notoriety of being a number 2 overall pick, and you expect him when it's all said and done to be much, much higher in this bracket. Junior Bridgman spent a lot of time. I believe he's top 5 in games played with the Bucks. This is a little bit tougher here because how much do you want to project here? And I think in the grand scheme of things, if Jabari doesn't end up being a more impactful player for this franchise than a Junior Bridgman, it's very, very disappointing. So I'm going to go with the upset pick here and go with Jabari. Andy, your thoughts?
That's tough because I'm really pro Jabari. Always have been, and obviously these past month or two where he's really started breaking out has been awesome to see. Pretty much due to... that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Bridgman, though. And I think in a couple of years, if we were to do this again, I think there'd be no question I would pick Parker. But just for all that Bridgman accomplished in his career, I don't think Jabari's accomplished nearly that much yet for the Bucks. So.
Okay, and I guess that leaves me with the
tiebreaker. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy because Jake, most of this season's been pretty down on Jabari. Up until the recent.
I'm trying to stay positive for once.
Well, and the play post All-Star game, which we'll get into after we're done with our brackets, that's one of our topics today. He's certainly earned it, but for me, it's got to be Bridgman, and it's nothing against Jabari. He's showing. Everything we've seen since the All-Star game is exactly what we want to see, and I think next year when we do this, he won't even be a number 7 seed, so we're not going to be going Bridgman versus Jabari next year. He's going to probably be up quite a bit higher. But where they're slated now, because of the longevity and Jabari's relative inexperience in terms of what he's done for the Bucks, it's got to be Bridgman for me.
Fair enough. And the next 2-7 seed... This could be real controversial. You've got Glenn Big Dog Robinson versus Ersan Ilyasova. Now, before we laugh him off the page here, he spent a lot of years in Milwaukee, and he is kind of what is the modern power forward in the NBA, and he was one of the first real stretch fours. I was never a huge Big Dog fan, but obviously this is going to be a clean sweep, I would think.
Yes, absolutely. We're going with the Big Dog here.
Yeah, no arguments here, and I was a pretty big Ersan fan. Like you said, he's kind of that prototypical. That's what you want in a 4 in nowadays NBA. You want someone who can hit the 3, rebound, and defense. But Big Dog was here equal, not quite. I think Ersan probably has more games and more years with the Bucks than Big Dog did. But they were here similar lengths of time, and we got 2001 out of Big Dog.
Yep.
All right, so the last 2-7 that we have is Bobby Dandridge versus Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, to me, Giannis is possibly the most exciting Bucks player I've ever seen to watch. A few that come to mind that could maybe challenge him would be rookie year TJ Ford, who's not in this bracket. Just for like the craziness of his highlights, like he does things that you don't expect to see on a basketball court. But I'm have to vote for Dandridge here. He's the all-time leader in minutes played, I believe, for the Bucks, and a Hall of Famer at that. So it's hard to pick Giannis. I think if I could reseed this, maybe Giannis would have a better chance to pull an upset. But you got to go with Bobby D in my eyes.
I'm going to go with Giannis on this one.
All right.
So obviously, you
upset
said
special.
Could be any criteria that we possibly want.
There you go.
I just see the sky's the limit for this guy, and already just these past couple of months, what he's brought to the table, the Bucks probably would not have a win since he became point forward, point Giannis.
Point Giannis.
If it wasn't for him, I mean, he's put the team on his back. He's just the type of guy that I could see being the franchise player for many years to come. I just can't vote against Giannis too. He's just such a good guy.
Well, and Giannis, it's crazy to think that I think without a jump shot, he's going to be a perennial all-star type guy. With a jump shot, he's going to be one of the all-time greats. But there was an article that ESPN put out about how his body type and his skill has never ever been seen in the NBA before. The length to go along with the not just his measurables as far as length and that, but how compact that his torso is so he can move around like a guard. It's a really, really interesting article. I wish I could remember.
I think that article actually came out the day we went, the last time we recorded a podcast, because I remember we were at the Miami game, And it was kind of a little awkward. Jake has pulled up this article, and it's got a shirtless Giannis with his arms stretched out, and
he's sitting there looking at
he's looking at it in the stadium, and that giveaway was Bucks fleece. So he's got this fleece blanket covering his lap, and he's looking at his phone, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on under the blanket, you know. I didn't want to ask any questions because, you know, he's got a shirtless Giannis.
And that's not an unfair thing to think because I'm sure that thought crossed my mind.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm once again the deciding vote here, and I think we're going to go with the upset and go with Giannis.
First upset.
You know, it's nothing against Dandridge. You know, he was part of that championship team, the only time we've had a championship team. And I think, you know, if you picked someone to vote on this who was maybe 20 years older than us, none of us were alive during that championship team. I know about it. So maybe if I was around and watching those teams, I'd feel a little bit differently. But Giannis, to me, is the face of the franchise, and he was never, you know, Bobby Dandridge was never the face of the franchise to me. You know, he was an important piece, a very good player, but Giannis is the franchise right now. Him and Jabari, you know, but Giannis is 1A and Jabari is kind of 1C. There's a little gap between them for me. So I've got to go with the upset just because he's so exciting to talk about. When was the last time we had ESPN and the, you know, national podcast and all the attention is about the things Giannis is doing? And like you said, things that have never been done by someone his size before. It's an exciting time, and it's most exciting because I know you and I, and we've all been talking about it since his rookie year, that he had this potential. So to see him realize this potential right before our eyes, to see casual fans who I've been telling for 3 years see this and the light coming on, it's exciting because I can say, I told you, this was the future. I said, just hang tight, we've got a bright future. And now it's really bright.
Well, there's the
first upset.
Yeah, and that's a true upset, a 2-7. So let's move on now to the 3-6 matchups, and I think the top 3 seed that, again, you could argue should be a 2 seed, Marcus Johnson going up against the 6 seed Desmond Mason. You couldn't get a better matchup for 2 more likable guys, I think, especially now Marcus and his work that he's done as a color commentator for the Bucks. To me, it's not even close as far as impact as a player. And, you know, D. Mace, I loved, he was a great advocate for the city of Milwaukee. And he was like the very, very tiny silver lining in the infamous Ray Allen fuck-up trade. So, I mean, thanks, D. Mace, but I think Marcus has a beat here.
I'm going Marcus. I loved Desmond Mason, was fun to watch, but Marcus Johnson, he contributed more on the court, and now that he's back in the broadcast booth and hopefully there to stay, because I've really enjoyed him in the broadcast booth this year, I think his contributions going forward are only going to increase, whereas Desmond Mason, as much as I liked him as a player, he's not really around for the Bucks anymore. I think he was coaching a D-League team, or he was doing something. I heard somewhere. I'm going to look this up while we're doing it, but I'm going with Marcus Johnson.
Yeah, Desmond Mason obviously was a highlight reel. I think you're thinking of Damon Jones. He's coaching a D-League team. And I was going to say Damon Jones and Desmond Mason had some awesome chemistry. It was so fun watching those two play together. But yeah,
that was the original Lob City.
You know what I saw Desmond Mason? I just found it on. He's doing art now.
Yeah.
He's got like an art gallery because he was an art
Maybe
major.
Him and Larry.
So yeah, he's off. I saw some article about him recently about his art projects.
But I'm with you guys. My pick's the same Marcus.
All right, so the next set of 3-6 seeds that we have here is Sam Cassell, Sam AM, the third member of the Big Three, going up against Jay Humphreys. To me, this is a no-brainer. Sam was, I think, so underappreciated in his time in Milwaukee. And my lasting memory of him, I believe it was Game 6 versus Charlotte in the Eastern Conference quarterfinals. He, with broken ribs, scored, I think, like 35 points or something ridiculous like that, and just was a warrior in that game and put the team on his back. And he was just so entertaining in his in-game antics, his post-game interviews. So I'm going with Sam as the clear-cut pick here.
Yeah, it seemed like whenever the Bucks needed a basket during that time, he was always the guy that got the offense going, even if it was just driving down, the little pump fake, drawing the foul, which he was absolutely brilliant at. You know, just a warrior too, playing injured. And that was during probably our most fond time of the Bucks, remembering the 2000 team. So it's hard to vote.
Yeah, let's go unanimous. Cassell. He was legit, and
He was underpaid.
I think he was underappreciated, like you said. Let's go with Cassell. Okay. No real commentary needed.
Sure. The next 3-6 seed is we have the 3 seed Paul Pressey, who was kind of the original point forward. He'll tell you he was the one who coined the term even. Then you have the 6 seed Mo Williams, who I think overall was somewhat underrated here in Milwaukee. There was a lot of bad blood between just a lot of those teammates on those teams, with him and Red being together and who's getting the shots, and a lot of people wanted Bogut to get more shots, but Mo Williams, if you took him in his prime now and put him in the NBA, I think he's an ideal type of point guard because, he can stretch the floor, but he was also a great passer, could throw a great lob. But for me, I'm going to go with Paul Pressey. Spent a lot of years here during the golden, well, some people would say the golden age for Milwaukee Bucks basketball in the 80s. Even though they didn't win a title, they were a contender every year, and just a unique player that kind of blazed the trail for these new point forwards.
I will go with Pressey as well on this one.
I will third the Pressey unanimous, moving on there, and that's no slight to Mo, because like you said, I think he was a little underappreciated in his time here. He was a pretty divisive player in his times. I'll just leave it at that.
And some hairy shoulders, too.
Yeah, and
let's not forget, he had one of the greatest Bucks memories ever when he hit that half-court shot against Indiana. I think they scored 7 points in like 40-some seconds to win that game.
That was a very exciting. I remember I was watching. That was first game of the year, right?
No, it was early in the season.
Yeah, it was one of the early games.
And it's one of a handful of times that John McLaughlin has climaxed on the air. So the last 3-6 seed that we're going to look at is Michael Redd versus Quinn Buckner. I think we can probably make this quick work. Redd was our last All-Star. He totally transformed his game. He came out of college as a slasher type scorer who wasn't even really that much of a scorer and more of a defensive guy, which is kind of funny and ironic that he's pretty much the last thing he was known for in the prime of his career was his defense. But he worked really, really hard to become a great shooter. I remember being at that game against Houston where he hit, I think, was it 10 3-pointers or something ridiculous in a very short amount of time. I'm going with Redd.
Yeah, and there was the game against Utah. I think that was the one where he scored 57, if I remember correctly.
All-time highest point or single game for the Bucks in history.
Yeah, so there's no question. As annoying as his contract got towards the end of his time with the Bucks early on, I mean, he was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm not going to hold the guy's contract against him. You work that hard, you score all those points, you get the opportunity to get a max contract, you blow out your knee. It's unfortunate for everyone involved. He didn't want to blow out his knee, but we got to go with Michael Redd. He was another player who was a bit divisive, mostly because of his contract and the fact that his defense was lacking. Like you said, ironic, because he was coming out of college as a second-round pick and potentially a defensive specialist type of guy, and turned into a phenomenal scorer and the last All-Star we've had.
All right, so now that leaves us with the 4 and 5 seeds. So
this is where it's gonna. This is
and actually,
ready.
Now that I look at when you brought up Michael Redd scoring 57, I kind of am regretful that we didn't put Brandon Jennings in this bracket, because I think there's a lot of vitriol for Brandon Jennings in Milwaukee nowadays, but. I think we kind of passed over.
We probably should. He was kind of a big.
He deserved to be in over Ursan or
he was a big part of Fear the
Tim
Fury
Thomas,
as well. There's
Blue Edwards.
Yeah.
So we are. I'll cop to messing that one up.
Next year we'll potentially have Brandon Jennings in this bracket somewhere.
Well, I'm gonna go right ahead to what I think is the most interesting 4-5 seed, and that's Vin Baker versus Andrew Bogut. Vin the 4, Bogut the 5. Both players, I think, left a little bit to be desired. I mean, at their peak, they were both very exciting players and guys that you thought you were going to build your team around. Baker was just a tremendous scorer, great low post player. I mean, he was huge. And then you have Bogut, who was the number 1 overall pick, and I think a guy that will forever be underappreciated because he may not have necessarily given you everything on the stat sheet, but you watch him play, and it was apparent he was the smartest guy on the floor at all times and did the little things that will never show up in a stat sheet. So this one I'm really torn on. I want to hear what you guys have to say before I make my vote.
Well, yeah, you've made the first vote every time, so we can take it.
I was saying that, that definitely is a tough one. That's one that I'm going to have to think about a little bit as I'm talking about it. I do agree with you. As far as Bogut, not everything that he did showed up on the stat sheets. On I'm sure not everything that Vin Baker did showed up on the stat sheets. Definitely did watch when Vin Baker was playing for the Bucks. Remember him hitting big corner three that I think put him into the playoffs the year. I'm trying to think. Yeah, so my Vin Baker memories aren't. I'd have to think about.
Well, it's
that
been a while. It's
bit.
been over 20 years since he's been on the team. So
it's been a little while, but I do remember him coming on, and then shortly after Ray Allen, and the team beginning to develop and at least squeaking into the playoffs against Indiana that one season. Was he on that team when they?
I don't believe so, but I mean they ended up trading him for it was Tyrone Hill and the point guard. Why is it escaping me?
It's escaping me. I'm Googling it.
Yeah, but they ended up trading that point guard for Sam Cassell, and that's really going to drive me nuts. I can't remember. I don't know. I'm going to vote Vin Baker just because I think the tiebreaker is he made a couple All-Star games with Milwaukee.
Terrell
Brandon, thank you. Yes.
I'm going to go with Bogut.
And a conditional first-round pick we got in that trade, too.
I'm gonna go with Bogut on this one, just based off of asking you if he was on that playoff team when they finally started making the playoffs and were the 8th seed against Indiana that one season. Bogut was definitely on playoff teams, so at least
that leaves you, Mr. Schilling, as the deciding vote.
I am also going to go with Andrew Bogut on this one. It's. Both players, you were talking about Vin Baker and you were talking about how he did stuff that didn't show up in the box score, and Bogut did a lot of that too. These are two guys who are kind of hard to quantify their contributions on the court with raw stats. The help defense from Bogut when he was, and I everything with Bogut is always going to be surrounded with the if he had only been able to stay healthy, both between the arm injury, the back problems we've had, the migraines. There's a lot of the ankle. It's always going to be that, but to me it was so masterful watching him that first year of Squad 6, which was Fear the Deer year, and just watching the help defense. He'd kind of almost lure the players into the lane to block them, and it was fun to watch. So from a personal level, I got to watch that more up close, and I also do feel very fondly of what he did with creating Squad 6, because the first year, now it's run by the Bucks, but that first year Andrew Bogut gave the money to buy 100 tickets and put us all in the seats. And that came out of his paycheck. So, I will always be fond and think highly of that for him. So that does put him slightly over the edge for me.
I'll say real quick, too, on Bogut that year when he broke his arm, too. Right before that happened, it seemed like he was having an unbelievable chemistry with Brandon Jennings. And I almost think if that injury didn't happen, maybe Jennings' career with the Bucks would have turned out a little bit differently, because it really seemed like
both of them.
Bogut as well, yeah.
There's a lot of what-ifs there, because they were playing as well as anyone at that point in the time after they traded for John Salmons.
Absolutely. The next 4 or 5 matchup that we're going to look at is Terry Cummings versus Alvin Robertson. Now, Terry Cummings, I believe, is either second or third all-time in Bucks rebounding. Alvin Robertson was a tremendous defensive player for the Bucks. I think he played 3 seasons during the 80s and maybe one in 91 or so. He's also batshit crazy, and I think he's in prison. I can't remember what for. Something out of this world. I can't remember exactly what.
Fifth in rebounds.
Fifth in rebounds. Okay. I'm going to go with Cummings because I don't want to put a scumbag through to the next round.
I'll go with the same thing. I mean, my memories of those two players playing are very vague, so I will go with Cummings as well in there.
Yeah, I'll go with Cummings. We'll give it a clean sweep just because I think he did have a more important impact.
Well, and, using that last name, you can make a lot of jokes with it and double entendres, so, I mean, easy enough. The Big O versus Cummings will be in the next round. So
Alvin Robertson is the highest steals per game in Bucks history, so he's got that going for him, 2.7, which Quinn Buckner's already been eliminated. Right, we did eliminate.
And I think he spent the most prison time of any Bucks player in history, too, so... He's up there in the stats, I guess. The next 4 or 5 we're going to look at is, I think it's kind of, these guys kind of mirror each other a little bit, is Bob Lanier, the 4 seed, versus Jack Sikma, the 5 seed. Both centers, both were great post-up players. Both of them didn't spend their prime years in Milwaukee. But I know Lanier made an all-star game while he was in Milwaukee. Sigma was kind of that hard-nosed. He represented what the Bucks were all about in the 80s, which was the blue-collar work ethic. And, it's tough. This is, again, if one or the other spent a little bit more time here, I think it would be the tiebreaker for me. I guess I'm going to go Lanier just because I think you look at a general fan in NBA circles, they're going to know more about Bob Lanier, and I think overall throughout his career he was a better player. So I'll go with Bobby Lanier. But Sigma had a great name. I mean, he was so Sigma.
I will go with Lanier on this one as well.
I'm also going to go with Lanier. Random fact, because I'm kind of researching some of these older players as we go through. Jack Sigma is the highest free throw percentage all time in Bucks history. Can you imagine a center doing it? He hit 88.4% of his free throws.
Over even a guy like Ray?
For a modern day, say, Ray Allen's number 2 at 87.9. That's for a modern, can you imagine that in this day and age, a center shooting 88.4% on their free throws? It just doesn't happen. And third overall in the Bucks, just on this, is one of Jake's favorite players of all time, Poop Ridenour, is third on the Bucks free throw percentage.
Anyways,
Jake can't even say with a straight face, get on to the last 4 or 5
We're going to move on. The last 4 or 5 matchup, you've got the 4 seed Brian Winters versus the 5 seed Ricky Pierce. This was easy for me. Brian Winters, I mean, God bless him. I'm sure he's a nice guy. He played some good years here, but he's I hate how many numbers that the Bucks have retired, and he's like the guy that, like, really, you have his number retired? Like, I feel like when Herb Cole took over, they just decided to just retire numbers at will. And Ricky Pierce was a great sixth man throughout that 80s team, who were kind of the sum of their parts, not necessarily 1 or 2 players. So I'm going with Pierce, the 5, over the 4 seed. And, Brian Winters, I guess the only thing that kept him alive was a great beard. Other than that, it's Pierce to me.
Yeah, I'm going with Pierce as well. Simply based on remembering when I was in elementary school watching Ricky Pierce, and again, one of those players that's like my earliest memories of watching the Bucks. He was a very good player from what I remember when I did watch back then. So.
Yeah, my vote doesn't really count. I probably would have gone Pierce, but I think it is very close. This was a good 4-5 matchup to me. Winters, even though he's not moving on in offensive categories, he's in the top 10 in almost every significant offensive category for the Bucks. I think he's number 5 in games played, 6 in minutes played. He is longevity with the Bucks, but I think Pierce, if you look at offensive rating, he's number 2 all time for the Bucks. Kind of that overall efficiency. So yeah, that's I would have given probably to Pierce, but I think it was very close there. And I guess that concludes the first round. That's the first round.
That took us a while, but,
Hey, that's okay. This is March Madness.
It's good discussion.
It's good discussion. So we're moving on to the Sweet 16. Thankfully, we did not go 64 deep.
Well, if we did that, we would have had Mark Pope in there. John Brockman would have been in there. Yeah. Darvin Ham. I mean,
Lee Mayberry. Lee Mayberry appearance.
Todd Day.
Sean Respert.
Eric Murdoch.
It's amazing how many times, Should we
Monta Ellis,
Elliot
Perry,
Burkowski,
Goggle Me Slime. We would have had a lot of guys in there. So we're moving on to round 2 of our tournament. Thankfully, this should pick up. We've got less commentary now. It's going to be more voting
about the matchup.
All right, and I think we'll go to what I think is the number 1 overall seed. Would be Kareem taking on Bob Lanier. I hate Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I hate his fucking guts. I think he's a terrible person. He never wanted to play Milwaukee, hated playing in Milwaukee. However, he is arguably one of the top 3 players of all time. I mean, you could put him as high as that. I think that moves him on to the next round by default, as much as I hate the guy.
I agree with you. The kind of rekindling of the relationship with Kareem and the Bucks kind of bothered me, just because I feel it's really, really fake, especially from his end. That might play a factor later on here, but for now, he beats Lanier.
Yep, it's got to be Kareem. Let's just go with the clean sweep there.
Okay, the next matchup is the 1 seed Sidney Moncrief versus the 5 seed Andrew Bogut. We talked at length about kind of Bogut being underappreciated, and in a way Moncrief was too. When you hear about like the list of players that were great in the 80s, rarely is his name mentioned, but I believe he was the first defensive player of the year, and to me, just statistically on the court, he was the most important player for that 80s team that made the great run, so I'm going with Sir Sid.
I'll second Sidney. I love Bogut. On a personal level, he's one of my favorites. I talked about it when we were at him just a moment ago, how I have a personal soft spot for him thanks to Squad 6. I wouldn't know you guys without that, but that being said, Sid had the bigger impact on the Bucks franchise as a whole.
Yes, I will go with him as well, and I will say I think with Bogut, especially now with his years with Golden State, he might be remembered more for being on the Warriors after all these championships that they're going to win than being on the Bucks, so I'm going with Sidney on that one.
All right, next matchup, the 1 seed Oscar Robertson versus Terry Cummings. I'm just going to write in Big O and move on.
Yeah, Big O.
Sorry, Terry.
I think we can probably do the same. Ray Allen versus.
We have
Pierce
Ray Allen,
well.
Ricky Pierce. Again, those '80s teams won a little bit more than the Bucks teams that Ray Allen was a part of. But who doesn't love Ray Allen? I mean, prettiest jump shot of all time, and to me, he's always going to be a Milwaukee Buck. I'll consider him that over every other team that he played on. Should have finished his career here. Fuck you, fucking George Karl. Fuck you, George Karl. Fuck you with a cactus.
Okay, now we're on to some...
let's go Michael Redd, the 3 seed, versus Johnny McLaughlin, the 2 seed. Both big-time shooters. McLaughlin, I think, would be a lot higher up as far as points scored if they would have had the three-pointer when he played. Had the rainbow jumper. And I go Johnny Mac again for the totality of what he means to the franchise.
Johnny Mac. I mean, it's everything I said in the first round. On the court, charity work, announcing career, the entire picture.
And I probably would have ended up going with Red just because of the monster numbers that he put up in points, and a 57-point game is just...
Certainly, I think on the court impact, Red was a better player than McLaughlin. I can see that argument.
On the court, I would not argue with you. For me, it's just the whole picture. Sure. I won't discount what the Mac Fund does. I won't discount the 30 years in the broadcast booth, and he genuinely loves the Bucks. Right. He is as much a fan now as any of us.
We're going to move on to what I think is the most interesting matchup in this round. The 2 seed Glenn Big Dog Robinson versus the 3 seed Marcus Johnson. Some people might even flip the seeds. Again, we said Marcus was arguably a 2. Some would even argue a 1. This is very tough for me because, again, I was very, very bitter when the Bucks drafted Big Dog and not Grant Hill, who was one of my all-time favorite players. So I'm trying to stay as impartial as I can here. I'm going to go with Marcus Johnson over Big Dog for my vote, mainly because this year in one of the broadcasts he said D's nuts on the air. I mean, besides what he did as a player, that's my vote. Andy, I know you were a Big Dog fan back in the day, so I'm guessing that's your vote?
That is my vote. I feel that when they drafted him, things started becoming a little bit more positive for the team. His rookie season, I don't remember how many points per game he had, but it was... I want to say it was in the 18 to 20 points. His whole career with the Bucks, if I remember correctly, he had that automatic jumper. I'm a little bit biased. I mean, again, that's another one of those players that I grew up watching, and not so much Marcus. So I am going to go with the Big Dog here.
He averaged as a rookie 21.9 points per game.
21, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that is a good. But as the tiebreaker, I'm going to have to go with Marcus Johnson.
Attaboy.
I'm a big fan of what he's brought. The broadcasting this year probably put him over the top. Going into this year, if you did this last year, I probably would have gone with Big Dog because I was a pretty big Dog fan myself. But give me some Marcus Johnson because of the broadcast work now and going forward.
All right, so let's move on to the 2 seed Junior Bridgman versus the 3 seed Sam Cassell. I'm going to continue with Sam Cassell here. Again, just for being underrated. A lot of people didn't like him because he looks like an alien. But, everything about him was underrated. People said he couldn't defend. I disagree. I think when it came down to crunch time, he was a fine defender. The only thing I think he really lacked was a consistent three-point shot, but it didn't matter because if you gave him that elbow jumper or that mid-range shot, you give him an inch, that's a layup to him. And also, I think he had the best free throw routine in the history of the NBA in that he didn't have a routine. He basically stepped to the line, and as soon as he got the ball, just shot it. It's amazing when you see guys like Giannis or Karl Malone taking 14 seconds to shoot. So I'm going to go Sam I Am as a slight upset 3 over the 2. Anyone?
I will also go with Sam.
We're young guys, man.
I was going to go with Bridgman. So yeah. I guess you're the deciding vote there. To me, Bridgman, he's just... They both contributed a lot on the court, but he's got the most games played as a Buck. He just had more longevity than Sam Cassell.
Yeah, I just see. Cassell. Throw in a Sam Cassell type player on the team right now. I would take him in a heartbeat. He's just that type of player that you would want on your team no matter what. And he's one of the faces, a scary face, but one of the faces you remember when you think of the good old. Run
our golden age.
Oh, yeah.
So the last matchup we have before the Elite Eight, it really is interesting the way these brackets turn out because you have Paul Pressey, the original point forward, versus Giannis, the new point forward, and there's something to be said for the first guy to really do it, and there's also something to be said for the guy that could revolutionize this position. Again, there's no set criteria here. So even though I didn't have him advancing in the first round, as strange as it sounds, I'm just going to go with my heart and go with Giannis here and keep it positive that by making this pick in a couple of years that it's going to make me look smart.
You want to go, Chuck?
I'm just going to second Giannis.
Okay, I was going to go with Giannis too.
Yeah, I think it's a sweep. It's nothing against Paul Pressey.
I hope our older listeners are just screaming at us.
Yeah,
right now.
I hope they are. That's maybe Paul Pressey over on Real GM is listening in, and his username is Paul Pressey, so he can correct us.
But we have to have a Cinderella story. Make it.
Yeah.
I'll be the first to admit my lack of knowledge for 70s. Bucks players to even early 80s Bucks players, probably factors into some of my picks here.
Sure.
It's also a lot of that to me is the potential of what we're going to see in the next couple of years. It's just like in the NCAA tournament, you'll get a small mid-major school upset the big guy because they're hot. He's hot right now.
Yeah.
And he just hit a bunch of threes and beat Paul Pressey if this was a theoretical basketball game.
All right, so that leaves us now. These matchups will determine the Final Four. So first we have the 1 seed Kareem versus the 2 seed Johnny Mack. I went over my thoughts on Kareem. Now is the round where I'm going with the upset pick here. Kareem, sure he did great things for the team on the court and that, but again, just like George Karl, you guys can get a double-sided cactus dildo and go to town on each other. Johnny Mack, Mr. Milwaukee Buck, to me, is my pick.
I will second that. Everything I've said, it's the overall picture with McLaughlin. Everything he's done, he's not Mr. Buck for nothing.
Yeah, I'm okay with Johnny Mack beating Kareem. To me, I associate him with the Bucks way more than I would associate Kareem with the Bucks.
All right, the next matchup is the 1 seed Sidney Moncrief versus the 3 seed Marcus Johnson. This is a very, very tough matchup to me because I think they were very, very good players, and they played with each other for a while. They both have been Bucks broadcasters. Obviously, Marcus more recently, and Sidney not doing so great.
Not as successful as Marcus, yes.
This is really, really hard. I don't know. What do you like?
This is a very close one.
I feel like I should say Moncrief, but I keep. My heart tells me to go with Marcus, and it also, by the Bucks standards, Marcus Johnson's number should be retired. I mean, if it was my standards, no. But guys like Brian Winters and Bob Lanier, they shouldn't have their number over Marcus. So I feel for the guy. I love his commentary. I think he's exactly what they needed on that team. So I'm going with Marcus.
And I agree with you on being real even. And using the commentary as the tiebreaker, I'll go with Marcus as well.
And my vote is irrelevant, but I'm going Moncrief. I think give another year or two with Marcus on the broadcast team, and I'm going to give it to him. He's increasing his distance. He's closing the gap between him and Moncrief, but Moncrief was a bigger contributor on the court, so my vote's Moncrief, but Marcus is moving on to the Final Four.
So that's
us, 2 number 1 seeds out.
That leaves us with the well, we have 2 more.
We have 2 1 seeds left.
The Big O, Oscar Robertson, taking on Sam Cassell. I guess I'm somewhat conflicted because, again, I never got to see Oscar play, but he's one of the greatest players of all time. He didn't spend a lot of years in Milwaukee. He didn't spend his prime years in Milwaukee, but tremendous player. Average a triple-double for a season. You couldn't ask for a better person, especially continuing on past his NBA career. Polar opposites, him and a guy like Kareem. He's so respected around the league, so I will vote for Oscar Robertson over Sam Cassell.
I'll second that. Big O is one of my all-time favorites just because of the triple-double. That's just a crazy stat, the numbers he put up. He did it all.
Yeah, I would have gone with Big O as well, just because those numbers are monster numbers, and as good as Cassell was, he can't compete with triple-double type numbers.
All right, so that last remaining Final Four spot is up for grabs here. We've got the 1 seed Ray Allen going against the 7 seed Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, if you asked me who my 2 all-time favorite Milwaukee Bucks were, this is probably 1 and 2. So for my criteria, I almost wish they were on the other side of the brackets because it's hard to pick one over the other. For me, the Cinderella story ends here for our bracket. Ray Allen, greatest shooter of all time. We'll probably get passed by Steph Curry as far as the three-pointers and that, but as pure a shot as you'll ever see.
Yeah, at the rate Steph Curry's going to be next year.
Sure, but again, being a good person is huge to me, and Ray Allen loves Milwaukee, still loves Milwaukee. I remember when he first came back with Boston, and a reporter asked him, thoughts about returning to Milwaukee, and do you miss it? And Ray got a little bit choked up, and it took him a minute to answer the question, and he said something along the lines of, he never really wanted to leave here. He wanted to be to the Bucks what Brett Favre was to the Packers, and he wanted to win championships here. So he really, really did love it here. He's I'm going with Walter Ray Allen. I love you too, Giannis. Maybe next year you're in the Final Four.
It's tough because I love those 2 as well. Ray Allen's my all-time favorite Buck and probably always will be. Then I ask myself right now if I could have either one of those players on the floor, Ray Allen in his prime or Giannis, exploding like he has been lately and approaching his prime, it's a little bit tougher. I'm going to go with Ray Allen at this point, though. Just a little bit biased there. Favorite Buck of all time, so it's going to be hard for...
I will third Ray Allen in there. I think Giannis, if he continues to do what he's done in the last 15 games, if we see this next year with him running the point, he's a lock to make the Final Four. But as of right now, we got to give it to Ray Allen. We had 2001 with him. We had much more longevity. Let's give the nod to Ray Allen.
So we have our Final Four officially. The first matchup is going to be the Big O, Oscar Robertson, versus the 3 seed Marcus Johnson. I'll be honest with you, I kind of just assumed that Sid was going to be in the Final Four, so this is a little bit different than I anticipated.
I did my part voting for him.
Well,
but you got to go with, there's no criteria. This is all opinion here. I'll start it off.
Yeah, you start because
I'm going with Big O. I've said it every time he's come up for vote. He's one of my favorites. I'm not old enough that I got to watch him live, but I've watched some of the highlights. YouTube has been phenomenal for being able to watch the older generation. There's a lot of video and highlights out there. So I'm giving the nod to Big O just because the numbers he put up he's one of the all-time greats, like you said. He's certainly, top 10. I don't know if he sat down and made a list where he'd shake out, but he's in that top 10, top 50 for sure, range for a player. And the only other player in Bucks history that you could say has an argument to be in the top 10, 15 players of the NBA is Kareem. So I've got to go with that for now. If Marcus broadcasts for us for another 20 years and does some charity work like Johnny Mac, he might pass him. But for me, it's Big O.
Andy.
And that could be part of the deciding factors. For the longest time, Big O wasn't around, and kind of the new owners have kind of brought him back, and you're kind of associating him with the team a little bit more. And I think that probably pushes it over the edge for me. Obviously, his numbers speak for themselves, but the fact that he's been around the team a little bit more, he has the respect of all the players. I think he was at the jersey unveiling thing that you guys went to as well. And standing side by side with Jabari, the young player, and him, obviously a legend, I'm going to go with Big O.
All right, so that moves him on to the next round, which is great because I don't have a vote for that. Let's go on to the last matchup here. 1 seed, Ray Allen versus the 2 seed, John McLaughlin. Again, you get down to the nitty-gritty here. Could you ask for 2 better representatives for your franchise, given what Ray Allen did here as a player and also just loving the city, and when not a lot of guys have. Johnny McLaughlin has been around for the entire history of the franchise. Ray Allen is my all-time favorite Milwaukee Buck, but because of John McLaughlin's longevity, I'm going with Johnny Mac to move on to the final. Andy?
Oh man, I'm frantically pointing to Chuck so that
pointing to me.
So he has to vote here. No, on this one, I will go with Ray Allen over John McLaughlin. But John McLaughlin's a fantastic announcer, and he's Mr. Buck, and definitely associate him with the Bucks. I'm sorry, but I'm going with Ray just because as a player, a little bit more familiar with him as a player, whereas I didn't get to see Johnny Mac play as much. So just based off of that, I mean, I will always think of Ray Allen as a Milwaukee Buck. I'm using that as my criteria, picking him over Johnny Mac.
And I guess I'm the tiebreaker, and I can't say enough about McLaughlin, so that's where I'm going in this. I've gushed about him every round, and I do love Ray Allen. I have a Ray Allen Sonics jersey. We've talked about it before. So, it's no slight to Ray Allen that he got beat out by a legend in John McLaughlin. It's a lot of people, Bucks fans, love to harp on Jim and John and how they're kind of homers for the team. But as someone who's had league pass in years past, I think you get league pass down in Arizona, don't you? You listen to some of the other announcers for NBA teams, and they are garbage. We should be grateful for what we've had in Johnny Mac and Jim Patchy, because there are a lot. You want to call them a homer, go listen to a Boston game or a New York game, and you've got some really. And I know their fans love it, and they probably hate me calling them terrible, but we've had it good for the last 30 years with those two at the helm.
Yeah, gonna miss those guys when they're gone for sure. A lot of great memories.
Maybe we should have put Patchke in the bracket.
Hey, he has over some of these 7 and 8 seats. He probably could have made a case that Patchke should have been in there.
Well, that leaves us with our final. The Big O, Oscar Robertson versus John McLaughlin. They were teammates on that championship team. Where are you guys going?
I'm going with Johnny Mac. And like I said the whole time, Big O is one of my favorites just because of the crazy things he did as a point guard. But John McLaughlin is, for the last 45 years, he's been with the Bucks the entire time. And that does count for something. We didn't have any criteria over how we were going to vote in this thing. But for me, the entire big picture, like we said, playing time, Mac Fund, the broadcasting career, and that's it. The Mac Fund probably puts it over the edge for me just because of all the good they do for kids. And not only has he done that as himself, he's gotten every other Wisconsin athlete of name involved in that, and they've just done so much good.
That's tough. I almost want to put Jake in the awkward situation of having to pick one here, and I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to pick Big O. Everything that Chuck said about John McLaughlin is 100% true. And again, like I said, just the Bucks bringing Big O around a little bit more lately. I'm associating him a little bit more with the Bucks. There's no question he's a better player than John McLaughlin. So that, combined with the fact that I'm kind of looking at him as a Buck again, I'm going to go ahead and pick him.
So it's to me, huh? You both make compelling arguments. I'm going to go with the longevity here, and I'm going to tab John McLaughlin as the all-time Milwaukee Buck. But I will say this. It's mostly due to his work as a commentator and his work in the community. So it kind of tells us, as a franchise, what we've had to... I mean, that's really what we have as our number one guy. So Giannis, Jabari, come in the next 5-10 years and take over this spot. Maybe we can do this 10 years from now, and it'll be a no-brainer. But for now, I'll go with John McLaughlin over the Big O for the slight upset 2 over the 1 seed, and in our eyes, the greatest Milwaukee Buck of all time, John McLaughlin.
Yeah, it's we should have had a trophy. You could have given him a trophy at the game, but like you won the Buck Life all-time Buck March Madness tournament. He'd have no frickin' clue what's going on, but we should have had a trophy made up. So that took up most of our time. I think we got a few quick things to touch on here.
Do you want to save it for the next one?
Yeah, we can. I want to quickly touch on where we sit in the draft order. We're at a little over an hour.
Fair enough. Yeah. Let's hit it.
Because we've been at around the 8th. We've been projected to be about the 8th, and as of today, we are the 11th seed. We've won too many games lately, and I'd be hypocritical if I said I was too upset about it, because we've said all along, play the young guys, see what they do. And since the All-Star game, I wrote down the stat for we're going. Giannis is averaging 19.6 points per game, 8.1 assists, 9.6 rebounds. Jabari's dropping 20.1 points, including a career high of 36 just a couple weeks ago. 6.3 boards, 2.1 assists, and then you got Middleton averaging exactly 20, 3.5 rebounds, 4.6 assists. Those are the types of numbers that gets you a new big three. It's unfortunate that it's gotten us to the 11th position in the draft, but we are only a half game ahead of Orlando, 1 game ahead of Denver, 2.5 ahead of the Knicks, 3.5 Sacramento, and 4.5 New Orleans. Anyone beyond that, we're not catching. So, excuse me.
Getting choked up about this.
I got the hiccups there. So it's unfortunate that that's what's happened, but because of the way we're doing it, I am more excited for the future of the Bucks than I have been in a long time, because we are seeing this young team grow up before our eyes. And even in that last Memphis game, we saw significant contributions from Ennis.
I was just going to say, what more can you ask
Inglis,
for? Those are the guys that close out the game. So if they win, they win.
Yeah, the bench. What more could you do? You could argue that the lineup we had in the fourth quarter of that Memphis game was a tank lineup. Yep. We went with almost the entire line at the time. Henson, Plumlee, Inglis, Vaughn, and Ennis. Those 5 played, I think, the entire fourth quarter until Henson got ejected for his, his famous
constipation.
His altercation with Matt Barnes. So that is arguably a tank lineup, and they put Memphis away. Granted, Memphis is playing a bunch of D-leaguers because their entire team is crippled. But still, I am more excited for the future than I was at any point throughout the season, basically because of what's happened since the All-Star game. So I just wanted to touch on that. Next time we'll have to talk arena, because we've got some new pictures of the arena that came out. Someone was listening to my rant just a week and a half ago, because I rant about it, and then a couple days later we got pictures. I'm going to take credit for that, even though I had nothing to do with
Chuck.
it. But that's really all I wanted to touch on. I don't know if you guys have anything left.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm happy that they're getting some wins right now. I know it's hurting their draft position, but you want to be able to know that these young guys can carry the team, and it will result in wins. Because if they're carrying the team and it's resulting in losses, I mean, that's a little bit deflating. I'm obviously was very excited and I'm excited to go to the game tonight just because of the exciting brand of basketball that they're playing lately. So they are probably the most fun team to watch in the NBA right now. A little bit biased saying that as a Bucks fan. The Warriors are awfully fun to watch too, but you can't argue that the style of basketball and the way that they're winning, they're doing it the right way.
Other than Greg Monroe being back in the starting lineup, I agree with you.
And that might have something to do with, I don't know if that has something to do with Mayo being hurt and the combination of having Bayless and Monroe. I don't even know. That doesn't bother me. As long as Giannis is getting up his shots and Jabari is.
Yeah.
And Middleton.
I'd like to see Henson with him back. Maybe he slides into the starting lineup here in the next couple weeks. We've only got 13 games left, so
13-0.
We'll be back probably
Still miss the playoffs.
Probably 2 weeks from now. I'm going to the game on April 3rd. That's actually 2 weeks from today. I'll be at the game versus the Bulls. But in between them, we've got about 6-7 games. Let's see what happens, and we'll be back at it in a couple weeks.
We'll probably be 6-7. That was perfect. 13 games, 6-7, 7-6, somewhere around there.
Okay. Well.
Anyways, thanks for joining us again on the Buck Life Podcast. You'll hear from us again soon. And Grayson Allen.